Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Social Housing Roundtable. This is a weekly networking forum open to absolutely anybody and everybody. So if you're watching back the recording or anything, please do get in touch to ask how you can kind of get involved with future sessions. Feel free to do introductions in the chat. Nice to kind of see so many faces in the room already. My name is Matthew Baird. I've been running these now for, let's just mute that. I've been running these now for just over 2 years. No, longer than that, 3 years. They started during the pandemic with the idea of bringing people together to have conversations that everyone wanted to know about, but couldn't always find someone to talk to regarding it. And I think what was clear was the social housing world is brilliant at communicating together when it gets the opportunity to do so, but a lot of the time these opportunities cost money. All of this is kept for free. We ran 48 of these in 2022. They're every Tuesday, just about 11 till 12, and very rarely on the day of the week. And they're kept free because I'm a social housing recruiter. I've been doing that for 11 years. I'm informed I'm quite good at it, which is nice to hear. But the funds from that are what fund this. So if anyone is looking for any recruitment support, please do get in touch. Without further ado, I want to introduce Connie Jennings and the amazing team, Emily, Parrott and Sharon, who have come with us today. Today's conversation was one which sparked an immediate kind of debate on social media. You probably saw on LinkedIn the poll that went off. We had over 115 votes in just 3 days on that one. And the question was around lived experience and how important having lived experience is in the social housing world.
Don't use so much energy.
I'm just going to mute Claire. There we are. Yeah, just trying to prevent background noise. So how important lived experience is when making decisions and actually informing the decisions we're making in social housing. So without further ado, I'm going to go and do some admin support to let some people who are struggling to get into the room. I'm going to pass over to Connie and the team. Connie, thank you so much for joining today, and thank you for reaching out via LinkedIn to initiate this conversation in the first place.
Thank you, Matt. Good morning, everybody. It's lovely to see you all on this lovely morning. So I'm Connie Jennings. I work for WHG, which is a place-based community housing association based in Walsall in the West Midlands. I'll give you a little bit of information about WHG and then some information about myself and about why WHG has taken this strategic approach to recruit people that live in our homes to some of our most important jobs, in particular those that engage with other customers. So WHG has got 22,000 homes in 20 local authority areas, but 98% of our homes are in Walsall in the West Midlands, which allows us to work at place. We very much focus on successful people, successful places. I'm the director of Stronger Communities, and as somebody that grew up in social housing, I absolutely pinch myself every day when I say that I'm the director, and that is basically based on the support and encouragement that I've had from WHG to progress in my career. So WHG has a range of initiatives, programmes which are over and above the core landlord function. So as Director of Stronger Communities, the services that myself and my team deliver all try to tackle the wider or the social determinants of health. So we look at people's income, what work they do, we look at their relationships and connections with other people, we look at their health and well-being, we look at whether they need training, we look at whether they have chronic health condition, illness or disability. And the team and myself try and address those health inequities in order to give people an opportunity to live their best life. So I came to WHG 17 years ago yesterday, and WHG was 20 years old yesterday, so it was a double celebration. I came along with a background in community development work and social housing. So I've worked in social housing for 30 years. I've never done anything to do with social housing. I've always worked with the people that live in those homes. So I am a bit of an outlier in social housing world. So I came to Walsall Housing Group 17 years ago to work on a regeneration programme of an estate that what we would call now had been very much left behind. So it was an area in Walsall that was a bit of a no-go area, high crime, high teenage pregnancy, high unemployment, low educational attainment. And we wanted that community to come together to agree to the master plan to regenerate their area. But because mental and social capital was so low and trust was so low, they wouldn't engage with WHG or Walsall Council or any of the other services that were around at the time. So I came on a 12-month contract with my objective to get the community together to talk about the plans for that to improve their area. And I was asked on my first day what was I going to do, and I said I'm going to recruit local people from that estate to make the decisions about that estate themselves. And that's where our community champion programme was born. At that stage they were called community experts, and the success of that programme demonstrated to WHG the real value in not just talking to customers and then doing things for them or to them, but actually having customers at the heart of policy and strategy when we're developing new programmes, initiatives, activities and projects. So I could have come along today and spoke on behalf of customers and spoke on behalf of my colleagues, but I like to be very authentic and genuine, and rather than speak on behalf of people who are quite capable of speaking for themselves, I've brought along a range of colleagues that work with me that I'm really lucky to work with every day. Around 70% of my team are WHG customers, and my focus is to get that to be 100% before I retire. So that's my target. So I brought along today Sharon, Parul and Emily, and each of them are going to tell you their journey as the WHG customer, and then their journey into WHG as a colleague, a paid colleague. When I talk about the community champion role, people always go, they're paid roles. And I always say, our customers' time is as valuable as mine. So if you're paying for my time, we're paying for our customers' time as well. So I'm going to hand you over to Sharon to start off with. So off you go, Sharon.
Thank you. Well, my journey into WHG started with a phone call to customer services that I couldn't pay my rent. And the guy, we just got on talking onto the fact that I got my degree. I left my husband because of domestic abuse, and all my artwork was developed with looking at what I'd gone through physically, emotionally and what have you. And at the end of the conversation, he said to me, would you mind if I nominated you for an award? And I went, okay, if you feel you must, carry on, do what you want. I got off the phone and I said to my daughter, I've been nominated for an award. I says, what award? I said, I don't know, it's something to do with rocks or something. I don't know, something. Let's see what happens. Couple of weeks later, I had a phone call off Connie, and she asked me, Connie doesn't just say, oh, you were being shortlisted for this award, but she says, do you know why you've been shortlisted? And I says, well, I think it's something to do with the fact I've got dyslexia, I went through domestic abuse, and I've got my degree. And she goes, that's because what's your degree? And I said, oh, it's art, and explained what I did and what I've done looking at domestic abuse. And Connie says, oh, would you mind coming in to see me? So I went, no, not at all. So I went in to see Connie with some of my work, and it says, I've got a project, would you like to come and help with it? And I said, yeah, of course. And I ended up being a consultant artist on the domestic awareness pledge that was started at the beginning of 2020, just as we went into lockdown. And it was, I think it's probably the first or the second time I've seen yourself, Connie, that you said you're going to come and work on my team. And I says, all right then. And it's been, Connie had let me know when things were coming up and everything. And now I'm a wellbeing officer at Cardan Point, one of our over 55 schemes, and I absolutely love it. And it's only because I met Connie through the rocks, and then I won the award of overcoming adversity. And it was...
What she's not saying is that her artwork was so insightful and intelligent, and we used the artwork in a series of presentations to colleagues to describe the impact of domestic abuse on our customers and on other people. And what that demonstrated to me with Sharon was that she could authentically empathise with customers that were going through that similar experience. And you then went and got a job doing activities with older people, didn't you?
I've worked, well, the job before this, I was working for Senar in Birmingham City Council, but before that, I was working in a nursing home doing activities. Now that just is a springboard to what I do now.
And the scheme that Sharon works in, you know, can be challenging for a whole range of reasons. And it's so powerful when you can say, when a customer says, what do you know? And she can say,
yeah, I went through that and I can empathise with you.
And I am a customer.
Yeah.
So actually, I do know. And that's what I say to the team is that's their superpower. When I first came into the professional role, I was, you know, very shy about saying about my background. It wasn't something that I shared or talked about. But as I've got older and more confident and more experienced, I now recognise actually it is my superpower, because it gives me the ability to inform policy and strategy so that the services that we deliver as social housing actually are fit for purpose and reach those people that we need to reach within our communities that often are called hard to reach. They're not hard to reach. We just need to think about, we need to walk in people's shoes. And when you've walked in those shoes, you're much more able to be able to design or develop something that's going to be, you know, that's going to resonate with your target group.
I think there's also a thing there, isn't there, around kind of pride in terms of, as you mentioned there, Connie, you know, you used to keep it to yourself. And I know it's something that came up on the poll of saying, well, how would we know which members of our executive team have been through X, Y, Z? And actually the fact that, you know, you're championing it, you know it amongst your executive team and you promote that, A, it helps remove the stigma. But B, it really kind of shows actually, as you've mentioned there, how much that can empower teams and empower decision making. So I think it's brilliant that, you know, stories such as Sharon's are there. And oh, we've just lost you on video. And I know that Parul and Emily are going to come in. I'm hoping you're still with us. Excellent. So I am not a social housing tenant.
I think the other thing that I would say,
Matt, brilliant, you are here.
Yeah, the other thing that I would say is it's at every level within the organisation. So our chief exec is a local boy from Walsall that grew up in social housing. Another executive member, so out of our 6 execs, you know, a good 30% of them have that lived experience. And you can see that in the emphasis and focus they put on ensuring that our services are well-rounded and practical. You know, our services meet basic needs as a starting point, and you know, and then move on from there. Can I introduce Parul to the audience now?
Please do.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Parul and I am a health champion, especially working with diabetes. And one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about diabetes is because of my lived experience with diabetes. So growing up, both my parents had diabetes, but unfortunately they didn't really look after themselves. So growing up, I remember, you know, they had really unhealthy habits. They ate whatever they wanted. They never watched out for their sugar levels. It wasn't until I was 16 and I was doing my GCSEs. I remember my mum having her first bypass, and it was tough. It was hard. But soon, the year after that, my dad had his stroke, and it was the major stroke. And, you know, my mum also lost her left leg down to the complications of diabetes. And so I was doing my A-levels. I was looking after 2 poorly people. Times were hard. Caring for 2 people, it was really, really hard. And the year after that, my mum lost her other leg. So when I went off to uni, I couldn't complete my year at uni because both of them just got really, really unwell. I had to drop out, and all of a sudden my mum, you know, she became blind. She had kidney dialysis. My dad became paralyzed. So I was looking after 2 poorly sick people, also going to work as well in a care home. So and at that moment, I think I was around 18. I was diagnosed with diabetes. You know, I developed all the signs and symptoms, but I didn't really know. So I lost about 10 kilos of weight, just like that. But the reasons why I do my job is because I just want to make sure that people know what it's like, you know, being a poorly diabetic. You know, my mum, unfortunately, both my parents have lost their lives down to diabetes. I mean, my mum, she lost her life at the age of 45. It's still really hard. I was only 21. You know, I lost my dad the year before that. So since then, I've had to do everything on my own. And one of the reasons why I do what I do is because I want to raise awareness about diabetes. When I go out to customers and, you know, they say to me, oh, I haven't had my checkups done. And, you know, I really question them. I said, why? Why do you not have your checkups done? Because, you know, this could prevent this, or this could prevent that, or this could prevent you from, you know, becoming blind. So that's the reason why I do my job. You know, since starting my journey here at WHG, you know, I've had someone come up to me and say, you know, because I do talks as well about my lived experience. And one girl, she came up to me and she said, you know, thank you. And I said, what are you thanking me for? She said, you know, because my mum, she heard your story and now she's having her medications, you know, she's making sure she's having her checkups done. You know, she's really making sure she's doing everything. And I always tell people that, okay, you're not looking after yourself today, but think about the impact it will have on your family members. You know, I lost my social life. All my life just revolved around my parents all the time. And, you know, sometimes it was really hard just mentally. It was really hard mentally and physically. I mean, my diabetes got worse as well because I was neglecting my health. So looking after them meant that I was neglecting myself. So this is the reason why I share my story to others, to empower them to make a change and really just to inspire them, really. Because I brought my HbA1c level. I don't know if you're aware what they are, but my levels were around 140 and now I brought it down to 70. And just by...
And what should they be?
They should be around in their 50s. So I'm still working on it. And I just love the fact that I can relate to people. Just like, you know, sometimes they say, oh, you know, what do you understand? You know, you're not a doctor and this. I said, I don't understand where you're coming from because I'm a diabetic myself.
And strategically, why that's important for social housing, Matt, is because 56% of people that live in social housing will have a chronic illness or a disability before their mid-50s. Healthy life expectancy for people that live in social housing is just 56. So WHG are strategically working with the Integrated Care Partnership and the Integrated Care System because for other housing providers, if you looked at your tenant base, they will be disproportionately represented in the core 20 population. The core 20 population are the 20% of the population with the worst health. On average, people that live in social housing and other disadvantaged areas will be dying 12 years before the national average. So as part of the work of the Stronger Communities Director that I lead, we are looking to tackle unfair and avoidable health inequalities. And one of the diseases that we are focusing on, because our customers are disproportionately impacted by it, are diabetes. So I've got 4 diabetes champions, all WHG customers, all with lived experience, that are going out to other customers to handhold them so that they learn to self-care for their diabetes so that they don't die at such a young age that Parul's parents died. And my focus for Parul is to get her back to university. So I don't want to keep her at WHG. I want her to go and reach her potential and her aspirations. So I'm going to move on to Emily now, a different story,
Thank you, Parul.
but just as impactful.
Well, okay, so my story. I've been at WHG 13 years this year, which is a long time. And my journey, basically background was, Connie spoke earlier about an area in Walsall that needed turning around. That was the area I was from, in Walsall. You know, very low unemployment levels, high crime rates, high drug use. So I grew up in that sort of area where there was no really ambition. Nobody really wanted to do well. It was just, you know, that sort of community. So I lost my dad when I was 11 years old to cancer. So that just left me my mum and my brother, who is autistic. So when I lost my dad at the age of 11, my mum turned to beer, so she became a severe alcoholic. By the time I was 16, she'd had 2 strokes. So I was caring for her at the age of 16, 17, I was probably, and also caring for my autistic brother. I was still at school at the time doing my GCSEs, going on to my A-levels. And I think it was quite difficult then, because it was, you got to get yourself up. I had to care for my mum before the carers came in, get to school, do my qualifications, come back, and care for my mum again. So it was a bit like Parul's story, really. I sort of lost my social life at a young age, but, you know, family comes first. So that's how it was. When I left school, I saw a job advertised for WHG in 2010, and it was doing sport activities with local families in the area that I was from. Obviously, I loved my sport, so I thought, oh yeah, I'll go for the interview, see how I get on, you know, my first interview. So I went, and obviously I got the job as a community champion. I've been there ever since. When I was 18, my mum had to go into full-time care due to the severity of her medical conditions. It was a bit of a roller coaster, really. She got diagnosed with post-stroke epilepsy. So she had a type of epilepsy that was alcohol related. So it was the alcoholism that brought that on. And it was quite intense, really, because every time she had a seizure, she'd go into a 48-hour coma. And every time she went into a 48-hour coma, she was admitted to the hospital for fluids, because obviously she couldn't drink. So I think 5 times a week I was called to the hospital to go and speak on my mum's behalf, because when she had her first stroke, she lost her speech. So yeah, my life was a bit get up, go to work, go home, or, you know, get called out of work to go to the hospital. So I sort of managed that quite well, really, considering, as well as looking after my brother, who's autistic. And then unfortunately I lost my mum 2 years ago. So I was left with being the main carer of my brother, who still lives with me now. He's 10 years older than me, but yeah, he still lives there. And throughout WHG, I've progressed. I've been in 4 different job roles. I've done my CIH, which is the Chartered Institute of Housing Level 3 qualification. I'm currently doing my Team Women in Leadership Level 3, and my aim is to be a manager one day, hopefully. But obviously I wouldn't have got there without Connie. Connie's been my mentor since 2010, so 13 years she's had to put up with me. But so my aim is obviously to become a manager one day and use my lived experience as a social prescriber, which is the role I'm currently in. You know, so all them customers that, you know, are scared of taking that first step into work, or having the door knocked because they owe rent. You know, I've been through that, so I can use my experience to help them get through that and give them options how to overcome it. So yeah, I think that's all I can say, really.
And that's why, Matt, I say I have the best job in the world, because my team are made up of such a diverse group of people, but they all bring absolute, unique, authentic, genuine lived experience into their job role every day. I say to them, bring your whole self to work. So when Emily was caring for a mum, this is way before flexible working was a thing. We just used to make reasonable adjustments. You go and do that because she would give back, you know, tenfold. For me, it's not about employing tenants, customers for the sake of it and ticking your box to say you've done it. It's about what difference can their lived experience bring to your organisation so that you are more successful at delivering and designing services that meet the needs of our tenants or customers. So that's what underpins. And I suppose in a strange sort of way, when I use my lived experience, I'm constantly rescuing myself. So you know, as a community development officer, one of the things I can't stand is when people say, should we have a coffee morning? A coffee morning when your life is chaotic and you've got to get 4 kids to school and you've got 2 jobs on the go and you've got no money and you're stressed out, you're not going to trot along to a coffee morning. So when I was a frontline worker, I used to go with a bag of bread, eggs, milk, beans and potatoes, and I'd say, these have been left over, would you like them for the kids' tea? And then once people's basic needs are met, they can then start to, you know, self-actualize and to be able to think more outside of what, you know, meeting their basic needs are. And then that frees their mind up to have that conversation about them as individuals and what they could possibly do in the future. We've had about 120 community champions over the last 17 years. Wow. And 98% of them have gone on to sustain professional roles. Community champions are authentic, genuine role models. We recruit customers in the area that we want to work in and with the lived experience that we want to tackle. But they're only good for about 2 years, because after 2 years they become too corporate, if that makes sense. So we then need to use that as a stepping stone onto either other jobs within the organisation, or to go into higher education, or to move to another organisation. I had one community champion who joined us about 15 stone overweight, low confidence, but loved drama. So as part of her support package, we encouraged her to think about a lifestyle, and she lost loads of weight. And we also gave her professional presentation skills, and she now is the PR officer for Violi, an environmental group. And she actually reached out to me on LinkedIn last week to tell me how well she was doing. And so for me, it's been my lifelong work really to ensure that services that meet the needs of disadvantaged groups are actually delivered by people that resonate with them.
There's a number of points in the chat, and before I go through these, I want to say a massive thank you to you all for sharing your stories. But more importantly, I think what's brilliant, Connie, is that you as a director of the business have clearly shown there that you aren't someone just kind of going, well, brilliant, I feel this is important. This is shaping and affecting policy and decision. And it was made, I'm going to the chat, Val Knight said, my lived in experience is disability, as I live with chronic pain on a daily basis. Ray has mentioned no matter how many times I hear about our team's lived experience, I find myself saying, wow. And Claire, Lawrence and a couple others have kind of gone down said, how do you get over thinking that your story won't be interesting to anyone else? So how do you get past that kind of self-doubt point? I don't mind who wants to take that on.
Well, it's interesting you say that, Matt, because when I say to people, we're employing you for you, because initially when they come in as a community champion, they try and change. And I say to them, no, we've employed you because of that experience. We want you to utilise that as your building block to work with other people. And they always say, but nobody's going to be interested in me. But I think you're getting used to people being very interested in what you've got to say, aren't they? Do you want to talk about our health partners and what they're like, Parul? She's a bit nervous. Do you want me to say it? So our health partners who are trying to move toward prevention rather than dealing with people once they're in hospital, and they recognise that 20% of our health outcomes are from your GP or your hospital service, 80% are caused by the wider determinants of health. And they also recognise that people with the worst health often have the least access to services, and they've struggled with how to get that group in the 20% of the population to services. And when I introduced the community champion model to them, they took a leap of faith really, because I don't think they understood it, but I think I influenced them enough to give me a small amount of money. And we launched the Diabetes Matters programme with 4 WHG customers with lived experience. And what that programme has done already has led to clinical outcomes. So people's type 2 diabetes is being reversed or changed, you know, that people are no longer type 2 diabetic. So the health service, which is a very clinical model, is now recognising the worth of champions, and they've only done that by listening to their stories.
And it's that I think is the really, really important part, is the fact that it isn't just, as you mentioned there, lip service, it isn't anything else that goes with that. It's so important that decisions are actually made based on the information you're getting from those who've actually lived through and tried to utilise the services such as yours. And as Emily mentioned before, with her, you know, I lived on that estate. I knew what it was like on that estate. You know, you can't fathom it if you haven't been through it. I think what's interesting, and I think when Claire's mentioned there about self-doubt and your own story, I think the challenges a lot of businesses have, Connie, and I'm sure, I know you did a roundtable with Inside Housing yesterday about this, was that unless you've got an advocate culturally to advocate and to promote you to be able to talk openly about that, actually it can be very difficult to go, yes, I have these experiences, and then not be stigmatized for those.
Yeah, that is very true. So the mantra that I always have is to pay forward and to leave a ladder behind. But you do need an advocate, somebody that opens the door for you. I totally agree with that. But I'm hoping that, I mean, I'm 60 next year, so I'll probably retire in the next, 5 years-ish. These lots say I'll never retire, but
I'm sure they won't let you.
At some stage I will. But I hope I'll leave a legacy of good, best practice, evidence-based practice that demonstrates the value for money, the way services land where they need to land, makes this a cost-effective way of working, because people waste so much money on glossy leaflets to advertise something and nobody comes. But sending out a champion that's a customer to door knock in the area that they live, or to talk to their mates in the school playground, or sit on a bus next to somebody and say, oh, we're doing this, that's far more effective than lots of glossy leaflets that end up in the bin.
It absolutely is. I'm going to read a couple of points from the chat, and then we're going to bring in Val and then Javine. So Denise had asked just a quick one, Connie, where the health stats from? Where did, because you mentioned a few stats there.
King's Fund.
Where, sorry?
King's Fund.
King's Fund, wonderful.
Or ONS. ONS as well.
Val Knight, who I'm going to bring in the moment, has said, unless you are going through the disability, you don't understand how the residents feel with stigma. Michelle Wood, it's fantastic to employ local people as they can definitely relate to their own communities. We'll come back to that in a minute, because she's asked the question of how this fits in with your HR policies and equal opportunity. Positive discrimination is absolutely something you can use when you're going through your recruitment piece. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. Nigel said, look at the resilience of these three people, and they've done it incredibly powerful. And Joe's backed that up by saying lived experience brings empathy that is so often lacking, but so important for the customer experience. Michelle has said it's great to have local knowledge too for a social prescribing role. Local people no doubt relate to you well, plus you'll know what is available locally, and gaps in service provisions need to be developed because you've been through it. And Denise again has asked what does too corporate mean, but again I'll flick back to a couple of questions in a moment. Before I carry on through the chat, Val, great to have you with us. Do please come in.
Hi, hi everyone. I'm just saying, my landlord, we've got some good, amazing staff out there that go above and beyond, but we've also got some, how can I say it, lots of staff that stigma is about disabilities, and I think there's a lot more they can do about disability, because there's nothing out there for the support in housing about disability, because it affects every culture going, and I think that needs to be addressed even a lot more.
I'm assuming something like what's going on at WHG would have been really useful for yourself, Val, with having somebody who truly understood your own experience.
Yeah, because I live with chronic pain on a day-to-day basis, and I'm on so much medication. Some days I can't even get out of bed, and when you live on your own, it's not ideal to be stuck in bed, crawling on your hands and knees to go to the bathroom. It's shocking.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think housing needs to step up and take notice.
I really appreciate that. Connie, from your side, I mean, just on that, did you ever get any pushback when you were first trying to kind of implement this more lived experience model? Was there any pushback from WHG?
Yeah.
And that's not to put the onus on WHG
Yeah.
at the time, but I think the sector as a whole.
Yeah, when I first suggested that we were going to employ customers, it was met with a bit of scepticism. But the model delivers so quickly and so fast. So the estate that we wanted to work in, you know, did not want to talk to us or engage with us in any way, shape or form. And that's because they'd been let down by services, you know, for a long time, historically for a long time. And immediately you bring local people to talk to other local people, the trust is already developed. You haven't got to spend 12 months building up, you know, a network of trust. It's already there. The champion, you know, their kids will be going to the same school of the tenant that you want to speak to, the customer you want to speak to. So the distrust is removed immediately. And there's some research that demonstrates that regeneration investment benefits the middle class professional in a greater way than the local residents that live in the area that's been regenerated. And what I really wanted to do was to ensure that investment in local areas meant jobs, good jobs for people, because a good job is the best health protection factor that you've got. And WHG really understand and support the connection between good employment and tenancy sustainment. So that's why they invest, you know, they've invested millions in employment and training and health equity projects and programs over the years. The champion model is now just like, yeah, well, of course we have customers who are champions. It's just business as usual, you know, why wouldn't we? But for me, it's not just about entry-level roles. It's about, you know, putting Emily on a pathway to become a manager, because why shouldn't she be a manager? She's way, you know, got the potential to be a manager. So for me, it's not about, you know, just putting people in, you know, job roles that haven't got a lot of elevation attached to them. For me, it's about having customers in roles where they can influence, shape policy, program design, you know, at both a strategic and an operational level. And then for me, when I can hear the customer voice in the programs that we deliver, then I know that I'm doing my job. And in terms of disability, my eldest son, Chris, 36, has got autism, and he really was the catalyst for the work that I do, because I was faced with services and language that I didn't understand. I felt very powerless. I felt talked to and talked at. And so he put me on the pathway to get my degree. And so it was from a point of having a son with a disability that sort of projected me to start to reach my potential. Otherwise, I'm still the only person in my family who have gone to university.
And those stories are incredibly powerful. And thank you for sharing that insight, because I think it's really, really important. Jubeen, thank you for being patient. Do please come in.
Thank you. I just wanted to acknowledge the contribution of the residents that have come on the call today. It's been so inspiring and powerful to hear what you guys are doing, how you've, you know, gone through your circumstances and are progressing. So really, really appreciate hearing your voice and hearing your stories. And Connie, I think, you know, I know you don't underestimate what you're doing, but it's so important in our sector, and it's so necessary. And I'm really pleased that you've come on here, and I think this is a story that needs to be shared more. This is how we start to address the stigma in social housing. This is how we start to really, you know, thinking about the Housing Ombudsman report that came out this morning for Rochdale. They talked about othering, how, you know, Rochdale had othered, but that's systemic within the whole sector. And so this is how we actually address it. And I'm, you know, really, really, very happy to be here today. I was looking forward to it, and it's really, you know, exceeded expectations. I just wanted to acknowledge the work that you're doing. I hope before you retire, you spread the word and help. Yeah, because it's difficult, because I appreciate you sort of touching on the whole, how do you get that message in at a strategic at the C, you know, the people that are making decisions. So yeah, just wanting to acknowledge all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
There was a question actually tied in with what you've been mentioned there, Connie, which was the one that came up earlier from Michelle Wood, was how has that fit in with your HR policy, equal opportunity recruitment process?
That's such a good question. So what happens is I always refer to our customers as being in a race for life. So everybody else gets advance warning of this race and train for it and have the right clothing and equipment. A number of our customers get told on the morning that there's a race. They haven't got any transport, so they have to walk to the race, so they're shattered by the time they get there. They haven't got the right running shoes. They haven't had any breakfast. They haven't got anybody cheering them on in the stands. And when they arrive, guess what? They get the worst lane. So surprisingly, they're not placed in that race, so they miss out. So what we do, we use a customised labour market protocol when we're recruiting champions. So we alter the requirements of that role to build in equity and inclusion, access to the role. So we recruit in a very local way. So we recruit locally by door knocking and telling people about the role. We don't expect people to apply online because we know that that's a barrier. We do a 2-week, what we call a swap shop with the local college, preparing people to be interviewed, so they've got a fighting chance of you know, getting a role. We guarantee everyone an interview. So we change the dynamics of that recruitment to fit in with the target group that we want to recruit, and we weight certain things in the job description. So you have to have a local connection of the area that you're going to work in. So you either need to have lived there, gone to school there, or have strong family connections there. Well, straight away, if you don't have any of those things, then you can't apply for that role. We also ask for lived experience of the issue. So for the diabetes champions, you know, we said, do you have any lived experience as a carer, as a, you know, have the symptoms yourself, have a family member that's had diabetes? And by creating the roles in that way, what you're doing is elevating the very group that you want to recruit to those positions. Obviously, in terms of equality, we wouldn't turn anybody away. But when we weight what people are bringing to the table, we weight lived experience over and above qualifications. So that addresses that often imbalance. And it's really interesting around the qualifications in housing that are being talked about at the moment, because one of the best qualifications is lived experience. And you know, if I was going to ask to influence, little old me influence government policy, I would say weight that as part of the selection process when you're recruiting people for social housing.
The whole thing around qualifications is going to be a really, really interesting debate. There is a need to professionalise the sector, but that isn't like, I think there's also a thing of going, well, actually, I've got lived experience. I've been doing this for 12 years. Let me showcase you what I do day to day. Right, there you are, you're qualified. And I think there's nothing wrong with that in terms of doing like a vocational test on the day. It doesn't have to be an exam because, as you say, that can really alienate others. So thank you for that. And I think it's really important that we do re-influence here, that you can positively discriminate for roles. It is entirely legal. You can do this in the right way. If you want support or help with it, I'm sure WHG's legal team or HR team will help. I certainly will. There are ways that you can make sure you get staff that you need for the roles that you look, particularly when you're doing something like this.
Well, the diabetes roles, one thing I didn't say is we needed people that spoke community languages, because one of the barriers to engagement in the services was community languages. And it's not enough to say we get a translation service, because written and spoken languages are so different. And one of my real things that I really worry about is when children are translating for adult circumstances. So is it 15 community languages? Their team speak 15 community languages. Wow. So
it's absolutely huge. I'm going to bring in Denise in 2 seconds. There's a couple of points in the chat. So one which was Kate Wood, fabulous presentation. That I deliberately look for people with lived experience, especially with the difficult job market. Absolutely couldn't agree more. With the market as it is, you need to be thinking outside the box. And goodness me, there's a huge section of people who can absolutely add value to your business. Why not utilize rather than going like you must have X years of experience, because it doesn't work in the same way. Like you completely backs your point on coffee mornings and on drop-ins are the same kind of thing. This is said for different perspectives, some vulnerable and more elderly community members and finding comforting. And I think it's that thing of they are one way to engage, not the only way to engage. And I think that seems to have come through on the chat, which is fantastic. And Michelle said, I'm sure Connie will have created a really positive and inclusive culture due to your positivity and support for the community and your colleagues. You're all so good. Denise, I'm going to bring you in. I saw that one of you made there with local people trust each other, and you've made some really interesting points in the chat as well. So we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Hi, Matt. Can you hear me properly? Can you hear me? Oh, sorry, I'm having problems with my volume, so...
We've got you fine,
what I wanted to raise, and it may be, people probably be like, get her off. But it's sort of like, when it comes to tenant involvement, I quite often think it's viewed through rose-tinted glasses. And I've been thinking all week about what it actually means by lived experiences, because my experience, say for instance, Parul's experience with her parents and whatever, you can have exactly the same model and a different person can experience that in a very different way. So lived experience in itself can be quite problematic. But as I've been listening through, and it's sort of like, as an housing professional, as far as I'm concerned, my job, if I'm working with tenants and vulnerable groups, etc., it is to champion the people that I'm working with and for, and the social sector and stuff like that. But as a Black female disabled social housing tenant, it fills me with anxiety whenever social landlords start sending other tenants around and saying they represent the local community. They're using them for our voices and sending them to support us and whatever, because a lot of them I don't like and they don't like me. So it's like they have no idea necessarily about racism or how I experience the world as somebody with mental health issues. And if I say something, they'll go, well, I don't get treated like that. No. So I just think this makes me really anxious. So I'm very much for have as much lived experience as you like, but get the professional training as well, so that you're understanding the intersections and all the different bits that go with it. But your job is about looking after your tenants and championing the people. Otherwise, what are you doing in that job?
I'll pass back to you, Connie. I mean, I completely agree. And I know the one thing that's really useful, Connie, when I've spoken to you about this, is actually how much investment goes in at the beginning to ensuring that people are trained and qualified in the right way. Yeah.
So she's exactly right. We wouldn't send people that were not experienced or, able to work in quotes professionally. And when we say people use their lived experience, it's not to say to somebody, well, that wasn't my experience, and I'm a Black woman, because that's not their lived experience then, is it? So it's very individualised. So we ensure that our community champions achieve professional qualifications as part of their journey into work. So we recruit them based on their lived experience and their resilience demonstrated to overcome those issues, and then build on that as a platform to ensure that they have the qualifications to then go on to other work. It might be a good idea to address the corporate description.
Yeah, please do.
Yes, what I mean by that is when you become professionalised, you don't realise, but you use certain language, you often dress in a certain way, you present in a certain way, because our behaviours are impacted by our experiences. So if we're exposed to a professional environment, we'll start to role model that environment, because that's what we do as human beings. So when champions first come in, and they come in as their authentic self, that's when they're most powerful to work with other customers, because there isn't that barrier. They look like us, they talk like us, they dress like us, they go to the same school, they get on the same bus, that lived experience only lasts for maximum 2 years, because the idea is that a community champion is a stepping stone into a profession, you know, later down the line. And also your experiences denote how you behave. So if you start to have different experiences to the wider community that you live in, your behaviour is going to be different. But what we hope is that champions remain in their communities as a positive role model to influence others that they live, you know, around. So that's, you know, the strength of the model is that resilience and that acceleration of qualifications and knowledge and experience stays within the community that they live in.
Brilliant, thank you. And there's a couple of points in the chat. So Michael had mentioned based on a previous point you said that people aren't always even aware they're in a race, they don't realise it is, which is a really important point. Michelle's asked whether there is a role profile, Connie, for the customer champions that we could potentially share around, which would be brilliant, just to obtain into a kind of resident engagement and volunteers role. And Judith has raised a really interesting point, which is what can we do to get the voices of every individual heard and treated as individuals rather than kind of stereotyping and boxing as it was. Michael, back to your point, Denise, saying you make a good point. Capacity building is key to empowerment. And Judith, is it just lived experience that's needed or also empathy? And I think that's a really interesting position there. And I'm assuming, Connie, that comes in. Michelle, just before I bring you in there, because I know you've been waiting a little while, but you know, that I'm assuming comes up in the interview process. It isn't just great, you've got lived experience, you've got a job. It's
behaviours. So we will know quite often people that become champions have been through our social prescribing programme, our diabetes programme, our wellbeing programme. So our programme of capacity building quite often is the feeding ground for future community champions. So when I say we recruit on lived experience, we also recruit on values and behaviours rather than qualifications, because you can teach most people to do anything, but if people don't have the right values or behaviours, I mean, my team is extremely diverse. The only area we struggle to recruit is men, because I suppose we're socialised as women to be the nurturers, the caregivers. So we are trying to address that by, you know, directly trying to recruit more men into the team. I think there's also a sense of, like you said, cultural vulnerability there, saying, right, well, I need someone who's got lived experience of diabetes. It's probably like, oh, well, I'm not telling them about that. There's almost a piece, but amazing that you've noticed that though, and that's what you're working towards. Michelle, thank you for being so patient. I'm going to bring you in.
Thanks, Matt. And just fabulous stories and journeys you've all had there. And it's really great to hear from them. And I understand the stigma. I had my first daughter when I was 16 and how much that can actually hold you back. And Connie, I was going to ask you, what gaps or challenges do you actually feel that you currently have or will have in the future? But you've mentioned men. So what are you doing around that, or what's your thoughts on how to engage them and bring them on board? So men have always been difficult to engage in activities because they need things in a different way. But post the pandemic, we evaluated our social prescribing programme, and men were picked out as a particular group young men in particular, our mid-age men, we were recruiting, you know, and supporting really well. But given the rise in mental health of young people, and actually in terms of loneliness and isolation, 1 in 4 18 to 25s are lonely, compared to 1 in 8 over 65s. Yet all the noise is around older people. So we're piloting a young person social prescribing programme, which is being led and delivered by young men with lived experience of the issues that we're trying to address. And it's a men-only programme, because I looked at some research that basically said men will only engage fully when it's men only. So we're looking at, because obviously, you know, males are much more likely to commit suicide at certain age groups. So we definitely want to ensure that our services and the opportunities to work in the team are, you know, balanced, and that it, you know, so the people that are on the young person social prescribing programme, I'm earmarking for my next 2 champion roles.
because their lived experience on the programming in general will lend itself to the work that we want to do in the next financial year. So yeah, you need to adjust your approach. You always need to keep an eye that you're not recruiting in your own image, for example. You know, and when I say that, for me, I mean my lived experience image. You know, it's really important not to do that and to always test yourself.
I think it's really interesting, the men only piece, because I know a number of groups who actually work with just young men, and quite often, because it becomes almost cultural, but it depends on, like you say, it's one study, it's one thought, but the fact that you're trying it, I think, speaks volumes for the business, because it might not work for everybody on the community, but if it engages some, then why not try it? And I think that's the key thing. Denise, I'll come back to you in a minute. Michael, we've not heard from you today, so I'm going to bring you in first. Hopefully. I'll see if I
unmute myself. Yeah, sorry,
yeah.
I didn't know whether you unmuted me or automatic. Anyway, it's just around kind of. It's not necessarily about the having men there. That's something that I know not a great deal about. But it's around kind of having the lived experience and then having those individuals be able to navigate services and work with partners, partner agencies, social care to get additional support, which I think is kind of so vital and so important that is kind of, it opens up a world to other people who are able to navigate it, and it's kind of and it's so much more powerful than just having a welfare rights service or anything. It is someone who's kind of, it's like a mentoring process, and just think that the value of that is kind of is invaluable, and breaking down barriers outside, so allowing people to get access. But that's my point. So.
No, thank you very much. And it's absolutely that. This whole point is about breaking down barriers and everything that goes with it. And we've got about 30 seconds left. So Denise, just before we make final points, I see you had your hand up. If it's a quick one, please dive in.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to the to corporate. And here I'm thinking about, I can't see Emily. I can't see the people, Emily, the person that does the sports. Is it Emily?
Yes, it was.
I can't see the people now. But what I was thinking was when Connie responded and said about the 2 years community championing and then they take on corporate values, the environment that Connie described as being drugs, no ambition, this, that, and the other in, surely it would be a positive thing for somebody like Emily that's grown up in that community and involved in that community to be showing how, leading the way in how you can develop and what opportunities might be available, that you don't have to have no ambition, because look how far or what she's doing. So I'm a bit not comfortable about this, people staying within that community model and not excelling outside of that, because that's exactly what Emily is sort of like doing as she's developing, from what I can.
What I'd say to that, Denise, is when you've built people's skills, resilience, mental and social capital, you don't want to break.
Oh, we've lost you, Connie. Is Connie gone? Oh, we've got you back. We've got you back. Hello.
Yeah. So what Denise was explaining is exactly the model. So we want the people with that new resilience, confident skills to remain in those communities, to be that positive role model. And that's why Emily's no longer a community champion. She's now a social prescriber, because she's moved on in her career. So we don't want to keep people as community champions for too long, because it doesn't enable them to move on with their lives, so it's an accelerator into employment.
And it's been brilliant, and massive kind of congratulations to the whole team, because it's exactly that, and kind of going, there is a route out, but there is a route to more as well, and there's that whole career path. I think we could have probably talked about this for another hour, Connie and the team, and thank you to Emily, to Parul, to Sharon for coming on. I'm hoping it wasn't too nerve-wracking. Really, we genuinely really appreciate you kind of coming on and sharing your stories today. And Connie, I know you reached out to me via LinkedIn to discuss this in the first place, and I'm really glad you did. Are there any final points you'd like to make to those here today and to anyone watching back on the recording?
Yeah, I would say recruiting people with lived experience helps me in my role. So I get back far more than I give out. Every day is a school day, and they come out with little nuggets, which I then store away when I'm writing a strategy or writing a report or planning a project. And they don't realise until the project gets delivered and they go, I said that, didn't I? And I'm like, yes, you did. There's your voice right through it. But, you know, for me, it's about me not writing the strategy or report all the time, but about co-producing it with people like these colleagues that I've got with me. So I feel extremely privileged that I get to work with them, not the other way around.
Amazing. And nobody can live every culture and nobody can have experience of every sector. So I think it's vital that we're doing this particular sector that really needs it. And with tenancy services managers and anything else coming up, it's absolutely vital. Thank you again. Thank you to the whole team for joining today. It really, really is absolutely invaluable. Next week, Oasis Housing are joining us because they've been doing a research report into homelessness and its effect with trauma and the impact that goes with it. So I hope you can join us there. As ever, thank you, Connie. If anyone needs to get in touch with myself or Connie, please reach out via LinkedIn. And in the interim, just a huge thanks to our guest today because it's really meant the world. Thank you.
Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.